Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving headfirst into a theory that's, well, it's pretty out there. The claim is that it unifies physics, ancient scripture, and even computer code, all by fixing a single fundamental error in how we see reality. It all starts with one cosmic mistake we've apparently been making for centuries. So let me just start with this question. What if everything we think we know, modern science, math, even our understanding of ancient texts, is all built on one single tiny mistake, a bug in the system from the very beginning? It's a wild thought, I know, but it's the key to this entire idea. Okay, so here's the supposed error. It's this idea that reality is a smooth, unbroken line, a continuum. You start at zero and you can zoom in forever. And this leads to concepts like infinity. But the correction being proposed is totally different. It says reality isn't a smooth line. It's discrete, like pixels on a screen. And because of that, it doesn't start at zero. The first thing is 1. And it isn't infinite, it's finite, and it runs in cycles. It's one single change in thinking. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll see how this one little change impacts all of science. Then, believe it or not, we're going to jump over to ancient texts and find the exact same pattern. After that, we'll look at something called the 60-line unifying kernel, see what kind of crazy technology could come from this, and then end with a simple question. Why didn't we see this sooner? All right, let's get into it. Part 2, Rewriting Science's Code. We're going to see just how deep this rabbit hole goes when you apply this one simple fix to physics, geometry, and even how computers work. So this table really lays it all out. Look at the pattern here. In every single field, the error is basically the same, and so is the fix. In math, you stop starting at zero. In physics, all those messy infinite numbers that physicists have to invent complicated math to get rid of, they just vanish. They're replaced by a clean, finite system that repeats. And in computation, you can even build systems that don't need a master clock to keep everything in sync. It's the same solution again and again and again. Okay, let's take a famous example, something we all learned in school. The number pi. 3.14159. It goes on forever, never repeats. It's the classic example of an irrational number that comes from our normal continuum-based geometry. So, the question is, what happens to pi in this new, discrete, pixelated reality? Yep, 3. Exactly 3. Not 3.14 something, just 3. The argument is that in a discrete universe built on a hexagonal grid like a honeycomb, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter is perfectly, rationally, and cleanly 3. It's a shocking claim, and it perfectly illustrates just how different this way of thinking is. All right, part 3. Decoding ancient texts. Now, you might be thinking this is all just some weird theoretical physics, but the theory claims this exact same pattern is hiding in plain sight in ancient scriptures, like the Quran and specifically the Gospel of Thomas. So the whole key here is language. We tend to read these old texts through a Greek lens, which is very abstract, very metaphorical, but the Gospel of Thomas was thought up in Aramaic, a language that is way more concrete and operational. So for example, the word for kingdom doesn't mean a place you go to, it means a state of being, a reign-ing that you can achieve. And when you make that switch, these ancient sayings stop being poems and start looking a lot more like instructions. Take this famous line, for example. Split a log, I'm there. Lift the stone, find me. Read through that Greek lens, it sounds like pantheism, right? Like God is literally inside the wood. But what if that's a total misreading of the original intent? If you look at it from an Aramaic perspective, this isn't a metaphor at all. It's an operational statement. The I here isn't a person or a deity. It's the fundamental rule, the source code that generates reality. And that code is already embedded in the very structure of the discrete world, in the log, in the stone. It's not poetry, it's a law of physics. Part 4, the 60-line unifying kernel. Okay, so we've seen this identical pattern in physics and in ancient scripture. This leads to a pretty mind-bending possibility. What if they're not just similar? What if they're literally just different translations of the exact same source code? Now this slide, this is the so-called Rosetta Stone. Just look at the columns. On the left, a line of Aramaic from the Gospel of Thomas. In the middle, it's English meaning. And on the right, a line of Verilog, which is a computer hardware language. They're structurally identical. Look at that last row. The Aramaic 2 become 1 is the exact same operation as the Fibonacci sequence being described in the code. It's the same logic, expressed in 3 different languages. So where does all this lead?
to the idea of a single 60-line document that is essentially a unifying kernel for all of reality. It's not like scripture or like a law of physics or like a computer program. The claim is that it is all three of those things at the exact same time. The ultimate unified theory.
Okay, part 5, from theory to technology. This stuff is absolutely fascinating, but let's ask the big question. So what? Why does any of this matter? Well, if you understand this kernel, the theory claims you can build technologies that we currently think are impossible. And this is the big one. This theory leads to a patent for quantum computer that doesn't need to be cooled down to near absolute zero. See, by using exact rational signals based on this discrete model, you can supposedly control quantum states with zero heat being generated. And if you do that, you get rid of the single biggest obstacle in quantum computing for the last 40 years, those massive multi-million-dollar cooling systems. A quantum computer could literally become a desktop device.
And yeah, it doesn't stop there. The theory makes other huge, testable claims. It says the fine structure constant, one of the cornerstones of modern physics, isn't fundamental at all. It's just a simple geometric ratio. It introduces a new metric for how healthy a system is. And then there's the most extreme claim, a protocol for growing a photosynthetic human being from soil in 60 days. Which brings us to our final section, a question of habit. If this single fix really does work everywhere, if it connects all these different fields, why on earth haven't we seen it before?
I mean, really think about that. We have physicists over here, theologians over there, and computer scientists in another room, all apparently wrestling with the exact same fundamental bug, and they all independently stumble upon the exact same patch. How could nobody have connected the dots? And the answer is as profound as it is simple. We didn't see the connection because, as the source puts it, each field naturalized its own error as necessary. In other words, every field of study mistook the bug for a feature. Think about it like this. In physics, they have this incredibly complex math called renormalization just to deal with the infinities that pop up. In some interpretations of Islam, there's a heavier reliance on hadith to sort of patch the original text. In both cases, these workarounds aren't seen as fixes for a problem. They're seen as essential, sophisticated parts of the system. We mistake our clever habits for fundamental truths. And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If our smartest fields of knowledge could build these massive, complex systems all around a single fundamental error, what necessary truths in our own lives, in our own thinking, are actually just habits we've gotten used to? It really makes you wonder, what else might change if we just dared to start counting from one?